Welcome to No Dunks here on the Athletic Podcast Network, and we are a few lucky guys today. I don't know how it happened. It took some persistence, but we have got an incredible guest coming up. First, let me intro the few lucky guys we got here. The man in the middle, it's Trey Kirby.
Ayo.
Ayo. And the man always making the magic happen, it's super producer JD.
Hello.
And now, I got to introduce myself. I'm Tass Mellis. But now, the more important part, Hanif Abdurraqib is with us. He is an author. He's a poet. He is a lot of things. He's an essayist. He is a true basketball enthusiast, and he's busy celebrating There's Always This Year, an incredible book. So we have to thank him for taking the time to join us. Hanif, just want to thank you straight up, first and foremost, for coming on.
No, thank you. Of the many things I am, I'm also a fan of the pod, like for real, in the YouTube commenting, that level fan of the pod. So thank you all for having me.
Oh, man, I appreciate it. This book is incredible. It's about basketball, but it is about way more than basketball. It gets extremely personal. You used the word pompadour at one point. What a word. That is an incredible word. I mean, we'll start with the basketball part before we get to the personal part of it, because it starts with you growing up in Ohio, Columbus, Ohio, the same time as LeBron grew up. You guys are almost the same age. And you talk about going to Akron and watching a couple of those games, having to partake in what was going on in the LeBron fandom. But I just want to know, from there, you became a diehard Minnesota Timberwolves fan instead. How did that happen?
I was a Wolves fan. I loved KG. I loved Kevin Garnett. And so I became a Wolves fan the minute he came to the league. It was one of those things where, high school players weren't coming to the league with much frequency back then. And I thought, wow, this new team, relatively new team, has a young star player right out of high school. It seemed like the stars were the line and the Timberwolves were going to be dominant for decades. Right. I thought they have this young superstar. They're going to be dominant for much of my childhood. And that clearly didn't happen, but the KG years were good.
KG years were fun. What was it like seeing LeBron play in high school, being in the arena for his games when he's, a youngster still?
Yeah, the cool thing for me is there was a stretch of time between, when Akron St. Vincent St. Mary was big and he was big, but they were still having the games in the gym in the high school. That was really impressive to me because you're just kind of clogged in this space, kind of people crawling on the floor trying to get a peek. That kind of intensity was really exciting to me. And it must be said that whole team was good. That Akron St. Vincent St. Mary team was full of extremely good players. Romeo Travis went D1, Drew Joyce played D1. Sheon Cotton played D1 football for a minute. And so that whole squad was good. And to kind of be packed in a tight gym and seeing LeBron play as even high school sophomore, it was so evident that he was operating on a different level than everybody else. The speed with which he processed and played the game, not to mention the obvious size and athletic ability, but really, I think the processing of the game and the passing for me when I was watching it was like, he's maybe like 10 years ahead of everybody else.
Yeah, I loved reading you talking about the rivalry between your school and his school and how that all came about. I mean, the Hummer and how it was there from afar. It was wild watching it and how he grew into what he is. And then leaving Cleveland, you talked about how you still adored those 2010 Cavs. I love this part. You mentioned their 26-game losing streak. Why did you like that team after he left?
Oh, what a bunch of kind of like lovable, they were just some guys. I mean, the roster, that roster was, I say this lovingly, maybe one of the worst rosters in my lifetime of NBA players. I know the Pistons had a more intense losing streak last year, but that roster had some, Cade Cunningham is an NBA player, and Jaden Ivey's figuring it out, and Jalen Duren's definitely an NBA player. That Cavs team was really just some guys. Like Baron Davis was there for a little bit and then wasn't. I loved Boobie Gibson for what it was worth.
He had a moment.
Yeah, he had a quick moment, and then a very not that moment. He had a moment, and then definitively never had a moment again. And I loved those guys. That team was awful to watch. But what was interesting about that team was that there was a point in the season where they were clearly tanking, but trying to do the dance where they put on a front like they're not really tanking. Teams do that type thing where it's like, we're tanking, but we're trying a little bit hard. And then there was a point in that Cavaliers season where they stripped away the facade. They were like, we're trying to lose. Like, we can't, even if we were trying to win, we could not win. And so there's no real point in going out there and acting like we're trying to win games.
That was the squad. I think you said it, you put it a little nicer right now than you did in your book. I'll just read the quote because it was awesome. And because I felt a little connected to that, watching the Toronto Raptors up close and bad team. I liked it too. Here's the quote. That band of misfits who felt like they were made just for me. Oh, the delightful mess of it all. A team full of people who are floating along, attempting to figure out their role on this impossible team that was mostly just trying to hold serve, trying to stay in place for as long as it could until another miracle arrived. A band of misfits, yeah. But they're just trying to make their way, right? They were just trying to figure it out. I liked all that. You mentioned the 26-game losing streak that they went through. And that
Alonzo Gee was on that team. JJ Hickson. That was just a weird bunch of dudes.
Yeah.
There was like I'm almost, I don't know because I don't have the roster in front of me, but I'm 99% sure Ramon Sessions is on that team because it feels like Ramon Sessions is one of those NBA players who's always on every team.
Yes, he is.
It feels like there are just like a million versions of Ramon Sessions and he's always on a roster.
Hey, man, 13 points a game, 5 assists a game for Ramon Sessions in the 2010-11 season. I don't know why it is. Those kind of teams just stick with you. Like, for me, it was when Michael Jordan retired from the Bulls. They became the worst team in the league basically instantly. And I'll always remember Cornell David and Dragon Tarlac. I'm sure Hanif, as a Timberwolves fan, Tass, you've had some bad moments as a Raptors fan. Why do these teams, when you know you're not going to win, you know you're not an actual competitive team in the NBA, why do those teams capture our imagination and stick with us so long, even if we've seen much better basketball on the court in previous times?
As a Timberwolves fan, I feel like I can speak deeply to this. There's something kind of fantastic about watching a team that is barely an NBA team. The Timberwolves had that team that won 15, 16 games, like the Alexei Shved and that level squad. And Luke Ridnour was maybe the point guard on that team, and that team was atrocious, but at the same time, they were kind of goofy. It was like a cartoon team, and that also I remember that team well because I remember the next season they didn't really make any changes in the offseason, not any significant ones. And at the start of that next season, I still told myself this is a year. This is the year the Timberwolves will be good. And what I love about sports fandom, and specifically basketball fandom for me, is that it's a safe space to lie to ourselves. Even if we know better, it's a safe space to say, this team that won 17 games last year can surely make a playoff run this year, even though they've made no significant changes whatsoever.
It's actually crazy. I looked up the 2009-10 Minnesota Timberwolves. Ramon Sessions is on that team as well. He really is on every team.
Jumping back just to 2003, because I just need to hear from somebody who was there. You were in Columbus, Ohio, as the Cavs were doing that tanking thing, and they got it. They made it happen in 2003. What was it like for that entire state to know that LeBron was coming to that team?
The draft lottery felt inevitable. I think what I love about draft lotteries is that they feel so improbable. That one felt inevitable. I know the exact odds. To this day, I remember the exact odds the Cavs had to win that lottery. It's 22.5%. Mm-hmm. And I remember it because my friends were writing that on their hands before going in the bar to watch, as a good luck gesture. And it just seemed like destiny. And yet, even though it was destiny, people were still so anxious. I read about it in the book, even when the Grizzlies got that second pick. And so it was literally inevitable that the Cavs had the first pick. People didn't breathe until they saw the Cavs logo come out of that number 1 pick envelope.
Right.
And that is something that losing does to us, or something that bad luck in sports does to us. It convinces us that we perhaps don't deserve to witness something great. Last year, not to keep returning to the Timberwolves, but very literally, there was maybe 30 seconds left in that game 7 against the Nuggets, and I was still sweating on my couch. I was still texting my friends might not make it. So 2003 had that air about it where it both seemed inevitable, but to people who love the Cavs and who have been through a lot of down years, it seemed also improbable.
A lot of Timberwolves seasons have seemed improbable, but this year it finally happened where they made a conference finals. It's there. It's it's official, and you wrote about it in the spring, and then you made a great video as they went into their postseason. Just in general, how's that been being a Timberwolves fan this season?
It was, I think this is the best Timberwolves. This past season was the best Timberwolves season of my life, and I'm counting the previous Western Conference Finals season that was just 20 years prior. So much of it seemed miraculous. The fact that they won that Game 7 on the same exact day, 20 years to the day that the last Timberwolves team beat the Kings in a Game 7. It just felt miraculous, and I love this team. I've loved this team for a long time with very little reward for that affection. And to get this specific team, I like Anthony Edwards. I've always really loved Karl Anthony Towns, and I feel like he maybe doesn't get he doesn't get the credit he deserves, I think, for kind of having a season last year that was very good and also very deferential. He just became a different player. And I think at this stage in his career, that was challenging. I love Jaden McDaniels. I just love this team. And I am at a stage now where we're going into the season after they've had success. And my anxiety, quite frankly, is at an all-time high because it just doesn't seem the season after the great season is always a bit of a letdown. The last time the Timberwolves made the Western Conference Finals, there was a real letdown that following season. It feels like they're primed for a letdown, particularly because the Western Conference got better. I mean, the Thunder are terrifying to me. Like the Thunder were scary last year, and what they did in the offseason, it's like I just don't know. And so I'm a little anxious. I'm a little on edge about, the point guard situation worries me. Mike Conley, who I love deeply, is kind of like an honorary Ohioan, but he's also like almost as old as me. So
yeah.
Expectations are high. They are high.
Yeah.
Anthony Edwards coming out of that season, it's like, yeah, conference finals is good, but this city deserves a lot more than that. He's taking it up a notch, and that's when you go from, if we make the playoffs, it'll be great as a fan too. Oh my goodness, this is it. He's calling for it. He's calling for the finals.
The stakes are especially high because it feels like this is the last year for this construction of this team. Because once you get to the end of this season, there's some real salary stuff that just is not going to mesh. And it feels like this is the run. After this, I think they're going to have to answer some big questions about who they can afford to keep and who they got to let walk. And, I don't know. I think the Gobert Towns thing was great last year, at least in the regular season. I think we got one more year of that, and then one of those two guys is not going to be there.
Yeah, you're probably right. You mentioned that Cat kind of doesn't get the credit he deserves. I'm totally with you. Like, I don't think that the Timberwolves win the Nuggets series last year without Towns playing Jokic the way he did defensively. Definitely, well, maybe they still beat the Suns, but he did a pretty solid job on Kevin Durant in round one, but then, doesn't necessarily look great against the Dallas Mavericks. Obviously, Gobert had his struggles against the Mavericks as well. These are two like the most polarizing guys in the NBA, I feel like. Do you feel protective of them as a Timberwolves fan?
I feel protective of Cat. Gobert,
Fair. Cat's homegrown.
It's tricky. It's funny because there's that whole that thing. There's that meme or not a meme. It's Jamal Murray telling the story of Gobert guarding Jokic, where it's like, I got him, and Jokic says, "Brother, I have 47" or whatever. I laughed at that for so many years until I saw it happening in real life.
Yeah.
I was like, this is so. It was like that scene. I remember the Titans where Denzel's like, "It's not so funny anymore, is it?" It was very much. I was like, oh, this is such a funny story. He can't guard Jokic at all. And then when it was happening when he was in a Timberwolves jersey, I was like, this isn't so funny after all. So, I appreciate Gobert. I appreciate Rudy Gobert's strengths. I really do. And I think he is held to a somewhat unfair standard due to the decoration he's achieved as a multiple-time Defensive Player of the Year. I also think he is sometimes challenging for me to watch.
Yeah. But, you nailed it.
I think that's also fandom. I mean, like he is, Cat is also sometimes challenging for me to watch. Anthony Edwards is sometimes, when I'm watching Anthony Edwards jack up like contested fadeaways when 5 of them have not fallen. All the players that we love are also challenging to watch. I feel like, Trey, I know you're a Bulls fan. It can't be thrilling watching Zach LaVine all the time. And I love Zach LaVine, but it cannot be thrilling watching Zach LaVine all the time.
How dare you say that, too? Because I'm very excited for him to come back, but I'm dreading cheering for Josh Giddey this year. It's like you spend the first 3 or 4 seasons of a guy's career with a distaste for their game, and then suddenly they're on your team, and I'm like, oh man, but did you see Giddey dishing the ball in the Olympics? Maybe he'll be solid this year. I always wonder what it's like for Timberwolves fans, because people are taking shots at Cat. People are always taking shots at Gobert, and then off the bench they have like the most widely beloved big guy in the NBA in Naz Reid. We got tattoos showing up on everybody. They did the awesome towel promo last year with the Naz Reid towels. I know they've got a bobblehead this year. Hanif, did you join the crew? Did you get a Naz Reid tattoo after this season?
I didn't get a Naz Reid tattoo. However, I did just have a book tour stop in Minneapolis. I did like a, which had been long delayed. We were trying to, I'm on the fall leg of my book tour, which it's wild, I guess, as a writer to have two separate legs of a book tour, but I guess that's my life now. And we tried to set up a Minneapolis tour stop in the spring that would coincide with the Timberwolves playoff game, but it just didn't work. And I also was kind of like, I don't really know what the vibes are going to be in the playoffs. This was before the playoffs started. And so we didn't know what seed they were going to be. We didn't know, so I was like, let's do it in the fall. And I did this tour stop, and I can't, there were maybe like 300 or so people who came out to the event. And afterwards, I have to say, in the signing line, I got at least 50 Naz Reid related things. People just handed me like stickers and buttons and drawings. And so he's really galvanized it. I like Naz Reid. I think that he is a perfect bench player who should certainly not start ever. And I think the Timberwolves utilize him so intelligently in that way. There have been opportunities like where he could get more minutes, and I think he is so good on that second unit. I'm excited for that second unit this year. I don't know how sold I am on Rob Dillingham yet, but I would like to be more sold on Rob Dillingham. I think that Naz Reid, and I love Nickeil Alexander-Walker. I really do. Like, I think he's a phenomenal player who was brutally miscast in his first kind of stretch of NBA seasons, when really he's just kind of like a prototypical 3-and-D guy who gets you 7-8 points a game and make life hard for an opposing offensive player. And I just love the effort he puts in. So I'm maybe more excited about the bench unit than I am about the starters this year. Timberwolves. We'll see how that goes.
Yeah, because Nickeil Alexander-Walker can score. I love this line. You just reminded me of it when you're talking about Nickeil Alexander-Walker, because I think that guy's got game. He's got the touch. You wrote this: the floater, the most romantic shot in the game when done right. Nickeil Alexander-Walker, he can do that sometimes. He can pull it off, and I can understand why you wouldn't adore Rudy Gobert for the same reason, because it's
no floaters.
Zero.
No floaters.
No floaters. That ain't happening.
He did hit that improbable fadeaway in the Nuggets series.
That was one of the craziest shots of the season.
That was bonkers.
Yeah.
Even that doesn't get enough credit, which isn't. I don't know if you give credit for something which never should have happened in it. Like, it just happens like but that was wild that he was able to hit that shot. Listen, this book, it gets so deep and personal. You get into prayer, and sometimes how you weren't into praying at times, or you were doing it, but you were half-heartedly doing it at times. And I love this quote from it. You wrote, "With enough repetition, anything can become a religion. It doesn't matter if it works or not. It simply matters that a person returns." One basketball thing I pray for, and you pray for as well, it feels like, Hanif, better nicknames. We need better nicknames. Because you wrote about it. You wrote about like how we're done. We're almost past the era. Like Magic Johnson, as you wrote, there might be some fools who don't even know Magic's name ain't Magic. And you talked about Penny Hardaway. You wrote the glove, the worm, the admiral. Where are we? Do you think it'll come back one day, Hanif?
No, and I wonder if some of this is just because of how hyper focused on branding the individual as a individual and not kind of a player. I don't know how to word this well. Penny was being branded as like a superhuman thing. Magic was like a superhuman guy. With the nickname comes along with that. Now there's kind of like an everyman branding. I would love more nicknames. I think I know Taz here, Raptors fan. I think Scottie Barnes is due for a good. He's like built for a nickname. Scottie Barnes he's a player. I look at players and I think we could have an all nickname team if guys would just embrace, and sometimes now the nicknames are good but too long. Like, I think the Stifle Tower is creative, but you can't really, that doesn't roll off the tongue during a broadcast.
No.
And it's not something that can be subbed in for a first name, which I think is where nicknames really the greatest nicknames of the 70s, 80s, 90s to me were either something that can be subbed in for a first name or something that's like the blank, the Admiral, the Dream, etc.
I'm totally with you.
We're really at a I don't think that era's coming back, mostly because I also think that players they're not embracing the alter ego as much as the guys used to.
It's all about transparency. They want to give you their authentic self, so you don't necessarily, that's the branding of it rather than building the mystery of it. You would put the Stifle Tower on a poster maybe, but not as a nickname. And I feel you're right, Hanif. It's getting worse. It used to be like, T-Mac. At least that was a second syllable or a syllable of the last name. Now it would just be TM, KD, right? Like everybody is just initials now, so you can make it into a logo on your shoe. If only we had like genius authors, straight up wordsmiths who could come up with some of these things.
I have to be honest, the last thing I want from NBA players is transparency. I don't want to know. I want zero transparency of the, I just make it. I would love for NBA players to become once again mysterious and, shrouded in some level of mystery. I felt like, when I was coming up, I got to watch guys who I knew very little about. And I was very satisfied.
Yeah, it's strange. Like I feel like you would read in like Sports Illustrated for kids, Jerry Stackhouse had his first ever dunk when he was in 6th grade, and you're like, that seems unbelievable to me that somebody could be big enough and strong enough to actually be able to pull that off. And then now you're like, well, I've seen LaMelo Ball. I saw his very first dunk in a game, and it kind of changes the way you view a player if you've seen them come up from when they're 13 or 14 years old. There's just not necessarily the mystery nature of it, and
that's true.
The mythological backstory. You don't get quite the same, which maybe is a reason why a dude like Victor Wembanyama was so hyped coming into the league. Not only is he shaped the way he is and blessed the way he is with skills, but also we don't know anything about him except for some reason there's a photo of him wearing a Tony Parker jersey when he's 10 years old, and then he ends up being on the Spurs. Those sort of things just aren't part of the media landscape, I don't think, these days.
Yeah, the mythological part is gone. But these nicknames happened so long ago. Like the glove, the worm. You can literally repeat nicknames now.
And bring back?
Yeah. And I don't think anyone would bat an eye. Maybe we would talk about it, but we're way older than the average fan. And so why not? We can't remember things that are from 30 years ago. Like, other than us who lived them as a kid, just bring them back. Somebody should be the worm. And was Rodman, was he that good as a worm? I know he's a rebound machine. Like, the worm is just a really good nickname, but does it suit Dennis Rodman? I don't think of Rodman whenever I hear the worm. I think of the hair. So, but still it's good. It's really literally better than what we got today.
Yeah, we're really, and we're also kind of in an era. Not now. I feel like I'm like an old man shaking a fist in the cloud. But I do miss that kind of. In the book I read about hearing about the Fab Five before I saw them, and that was so cool to me. That was so cool to be a kid on a basketball court watching a pickup game and hearing my older peers talk about this team out of Michigan, and then finally seeing them and getting to bask in that mythology. And I get that that's not where we are today. Victor Wembanyama was kind of like that for sure.
Yep.
But I don't think we're going to get that frequently, and I'm okay with that. But I do think that when you kind of pull the pin out of the mythology machine, the word of mouth mythology machine specifically, you also lose access to nicknames and kind of more playful world building like that.
I gotta go with this question here. This may not be fair, but I need to know, since you wrote this book, and there is a lot of you growing up in the state of Ohio, has LeBron reached out just to say, hey, this was a good book? Just curious. And if you don't want to answer that, that's totally fine, because I've totally been selfish with this one.
He hasn't. We've never spoken. We've never been in each other's orbit. I know he has the book. I got it, or at least I believe that he has the book. I got it to him through Rich Paul, which is very kind. But I don't know if he's read it. If I were him, I don't know if I'd want to read it. I don't know how he is about reading about himself. I'm not that interested in reading about myself, and I'm not even a fraction of I don't have a fraction of the notoriety that LeBron has. So I don't know if reading about himself would be, even though the book does encompass a lot and he is a fraction of that, I don't know if reading about himself would be a comfortable or joyful thing for him. But
fair.
I know he has it. I hope he gets to it a little bit. I think
he'll at least check out the first page, I'm sure.
Yeah. I hope he carries it in the arena. If nothing else, I hope he carries it into Staples Center.
Yeah, because it's got a beautiful cover. Even Danielle, my wife, walked by it and said, "Whoa, I love the cover of that book." So you got me some brownie points. So your editing team that made this for you, it's a beautiful cover. So LeBron's got to carry it.
Well, LeBron will carry it at some point. But, I mean, you've had a ton of success with this book and with your prior books and other works that you've put out. What do you consider, like, an accomplishment you're proudest of? Because you've got literally a MacArthur Genius Grant. Amazing. You've got a mural in your hometown, and you've been on Barack Obama's reading list twice. Like, if you're bragging on yourself, which you say you don't want to do, but we're making you do it now, what would you lead with?
You know what's funny is, like, a writer's achievements are so hard to translate to the, like, if I told people I have a MacArthur Genius Grant, they'd be like, cool, what does that mean?
I had to look it up.
Yeah, it's like the word genius is in the title, but actually what does that mean? Because I watched you at the grocery store count on your fingers to do math. So, you know, I think I would just lead with the fact that I've written, I guess, six books. You know, I think when I quantify the number of books, to say I've written 6 books in 10 years or so, less than 10 years, 6 books in 8 years. I think that will allow people to say, wow. Because if I start listing the like accolades, people don't really know what the National Book Awards are. They know what they sound like. They are what they sound like, you know. And a MacArthur Genius Grant is what it sounds like. But I will say, in terms of just the elders in my life, specifically like older Black people in my life, the Barack Obama's reading list thing is the thing. They're all very excited about that. And, you know, there's like a group of old ladies that I gossip with in my neighborhood, and they like printed that out and cut it out and put it on their wall. So I think it depends on the audience, but really and truly, writer accomplishments aren't like, you know, there is no real NBA championship version that's a one-to-one easy to explain thing, because I often think about this. My actual official bio, my bio that I use for introductions and things like that, or it's just Hanif Abdurraqib is a writer from the east side of Columbus, Ohio. Because when you start to list the accomplishments, so many people who are not tapped into the world of art making or writing, they don't know what a MacArthur Genius Grant is, or a Wyndham Campbell Prize, or a National Book, or whatever. They're just kind of like, it's just a guy. So I think I'm trying to lean into the being just a guy who so happened to have written some books every now and then.
On that note, this past year, almost, as you said, you're going through 2 book tours this year. Just as a personal memory for yourself, what has been the best part of just this tour specifically? Has there been anything that stands out to you?
Yeah. It's been special. You know, like and I will say, I guess one thing that I would lead with as my biggest accomplishment is that I've been a Timberwolves fan since 1997. To be a Timberwolves fan since like 1995 and still be alive and healthy.
Yeah.
I never gave up.
Never gave up. I never gave up on the Timberwolves. That is perhaps bigger to me than the MacArthur Grant.
Yeah. When he was introduced in the Sky Dome, when Kevin Garnett was introduced in 1995 in the Sky Dome, when I was basically becoming a Toronto Raptors fan, I thought, okay, this guy is really good. This guy is going to be good, but he's not going to be the best of anybody, and he was. And got you in.
Book tour. You know, this book tour has been special because, you know, I haven't done an in-person tour since 2019. And I set out on this book tour kind of thinking, well, you know, a few people come to these shows, and that's cool. But it's been not only the size of the audiences, which has been wonderful. Like, I sold out 2 shows back to back in New York. And a lot of this that's thrilling to me is not just that I get to pat myself on the back and say, like, 400 people came to this thing or 500 people came to this thing, but it's that for me, writing is something that I did always to feel a little bit more connected to people. I'm the youngest of 4. I grew up a lot of time on my own, not because my household was neglectful, but just because when you're the youngest of 4, everyone has their own thing and you're kind of left behind. And I spent a lot of my time alone in my 20s with my own excitements, thinking that they were no one else's excitements. And so I think a big part of the reason why I began writing was to try and connect my excitements to the excitements of others. And the best part about a book tour is that I get to stand in a signing line, even if it's a very long signing line, and talk to people about music or their favorite basketball teams. This book tour especially has been exciting because this is the first book of mine that's like this. And so I've gotten to hear stories from basketball fans of the first games they went to. And, I've gotten to kind of share stories about players that I love and that we all love, and getting to tour that kind of, I'm excited about the fall tour because it'll run up right through the start of the NBA season. And so that will be exciting. But really the stretch of tour that's been most exciting is just seeing how in this year with this book, seeing how it's been embraced by NBA folks. Cause truthfully, when this book came out and we made this book, I was like, I don't think any basketball people are going to really rock with this. I just thought, it's not only about basketball that goes to all these other places, but we've been really lucky. And I've been really lucky in that, it's been embraced by like y'all, and it's been embraced by, the NBA on TNT had me do that playoff video, and they came to Columbus to film it, which was really special to me, sure. To have the NBA on TNT travel to Columbus and film a playoff commercial, which is unreal. And to basketball is such a big part of my life. It's a massive part of my life. I think that people knew me as a music writer for a very long time, or like a pop culture writer, and I am that as well. But basketball is such a massive part of my life, and to have this book come out and be embraced by, the basketball world that I've followed and been connected to for a long time has been the best part of the year.
What's it like getting to be a part of those pregame hype videos? You did one for the Timberwolves going into the playoffs. You did the NBA on TNT as well, and then I just saw you were at a Columbus Crew, going Kool-Aid Man, breaking through the walls before, I don't know, exploding something there. That one looked crazy, man.
Yeah, that is, the Crew thing was very much not my, that's not the mode I'm usually operating in. When they asked me to do that, I was like, you guys, I don't know if I'm the guy to break through a wall and detonate a fake bomb. But that was cool. I mean, the Crew, the Crew is my longest running team. I'm a Timberwolves fan, of course, but I've loved the Crew since I came to Columbus, and it's been interesting. I'm not every time I get asked to do one of those things, it feels like this is going to go horribly wrong. I remember when NBA on TNT asked me to write a whole kind of long form prose poetic thing, and I wrote it, and they were like, "No, you can get weirder, it can get more image heavy." And I remember thinking, "Oh God, everyone's going to hate this." So I think my brain is still very much tuned to, and the Timberwolves thing was really special. I mean, I came off the road, I was on tour, and they kind of asked me in a very last minute way, and I was like, I'll have to come off the road, fly to Minneapolis on a Sunday morning, fly out of Minneapolis Sunday afternoon, and do a show that night in it was somewhere on the East Coast, and I remember thinking, it's worth it. Doesn't matter, it's worth it. If I'm half awake fighting through this show at the end of the night, it's worth it, because who knows, particularly with the Timberwolves, my whole thing was like, who knows, they might never make the playoffs again. I don't think that's true, but they might never. You have to treat it.
Got to cover your bases.
Like that. Yeah, cover the bases. I remember, and I know that y'all certainly remember this, especially that 1 year the Raptors had, that one championship year. It felt like that was one of the most destiny-driven years I think I can remember, where it just felt like the Raptors are destined to win the title, and then it may never happen again. Straight up. If I were a Raptors fan, I would have mortgaged my entire home in life savings to go to every finals game that year, because it seemed like it was going to happen, and then it might never happen again. And so that was my approach, I took with the Timberwolves, where it's like, whatever I'm asked to do, I'll do it, because what if they never get this far again? So it's been special. And I just think that the response from basketball folks has been really cool, and has made me feel like my kind of fandom, which is deeply anxious, but also steeped in this kind of interest in the beauty and the real heart of sport, loving sports and dedication and devotion. There's room for that kind of fandom, and it's something we all share. And so I feel really accepted in that way.
Yeah, you speaking of the beauty of it all, you get into the beauty of playing on the blacktop, playing on pavement, and that part is so beautiful to me as part of the book. But there's so many parts in this book. I could just read it here if you want to just listen to me reading the book. It was super fun reading this book. I want to ask just a simple question, because you have been a Timberwolves fan for so long. Your thoughts on Anthony Edwards, just in general, period. How do you feel about him?
I like Anthony Edwards. Let me say that first because I don't want Timberwolves fans to. I am perhaps not as rapturously in love with Anthony Edwards as most Timberwolves fans are. I like him so much. I think there's real space for him to grow as a player. And I think he's working. Like, you can really tell he's working. I struggle sometimes with the shot selection. And there are times where it seems like he would like to take over the game where he's not yet equipped to do that. A lot of contested fadeaways at points. But also, to watch his game grow has been impressive, and I can tell he's working. I think that sometimes he's a little talkative in ways that are sometimes funny, but then the thing happens where he realizes that people are enjoying him being talkative, and then the talking gets a little bit more grating for me. Man, I truly I'm one of those people who I would love to hear no more takes on the NBA in the 90s. Just no, I would love it if I could just stop everyone from talking about the NBA in the 90s. I would love, like, let's just let that rest. And so Anthony Edwards being like, I didn't watch it, so I don't really know anything about it. And here's an opinion. It's like, oh man, come on. It's just let him. Yeah. I have no idea what I'm talking about. However, I'm going to talk.
Let me say this.
So that was rough. I do think he's, I love the fact that the Timberwolves have a star that is getting attention. The Timberwolves in my lifetime have only had one other star that has gotten national attention, KG. And I think for a lot of years, even great players who played in Minnesota they were treated as though they were just kind of empty stat guys. I mean, Kevin Love specifically, which, I mean, look, I know that the idea of the empty stat is controversial. I watched those Kevin Love seasons. Yeah, I mean, he was maybe, the stats were not, they were not fulfilling. In a sense. But it's cool to have a star player who is magnetic in drawing the attention of the league, and I think that's just good for the city. And I would love for him to be there for a long time. That's really what my hope for Anthony Edwards is. I would love for him the city's embraced him, and he's really done a good job of embracing the city. And I would love it if the Minnesota Timberwolves could be a place that is not viewed as a team that people come to ascend and then leave. And I don't mean that just for the Timberwolves. I mean that for, the reason I love, even though I wish they were not in the Western Conference and specifically not in the same division. The reason I love Oklahoma City and what Oklahoma City's been able to build is because they're kind of setting a precedent where it's like, you come here to build something. You don't come here to be a star and then be courted to go somewhere else. Oklahoma City is building something that feels to me like it's really sustainable and a blueprint for what a quote unquote small market team can do. Now, do I wish that the Timberwolves didn't have to play Oklahoma City with frequency? And do I wish that Oklahoma City wasn't inevitably going to be a roadblock for them in the playoffs? Of course, but I love what Oklahoma City's doing.
Yeah, we got to hope that for Minnesota in general, to be one of those teams that isn't we'll try and get you, like it's more about the destination, as you said,
not a way station.
Yeah, that would be phenomenal for Anthony Edwards as he develops, and he's so young. He's only 23. When you look at it, it's kind of surprising because he does get a lot of talk time, and everybody's talking now in the NBA. It's a changed world. We all got podcasts, and we can talk.
We all got podcasts
anytime. Yeah. But yeah, it was getting a little deep sometimes. Even in the Olympics talks, there was.
Yeah.
Well, we see what Anthony Edwards can be, and like the aesthetics of his game are so similar to Michael Jordan. It's so tantalizing to see a guy play above the rim and get any shot he wants. And at this point, you just assume that because we've seen Edwards do it, like you assume he shoots 75% from the field because he's awesome and every one of his makes looks super cool. Yeah, he's got some steps to make efficiency wise, shot selection wise, till he's actually at the level that everybody's putting him at. But man, having him on your team, having a guy like that being able to root for, it really puts a wind in your sails. Like the Bulls haven't had that really since Derrick Rose, having that superstar that people are interested in seeing. But you're right, Hanif. He's like right on the edge. I was like, when he was shooting bank shots all the time last year, I was like, oh, this is pretty cool. Then everybody noticed he was shooting bank shots, so suddenly he was shooting them from 3-point range, and then he completely submarined the Shooting Stars competition or whatever it was at All-Star Weekend. It was like, okay, man, we still got to take things a little bit seriously here. But you're right, Jess. The dude is so young.
He is stupid young. It is remarkable.
I'm excited about. Can I throw that back at you, Tess?
Yeah.
How do you feel about? Are you excited about Scottie Barnes? And I ask this because, like, I love Scottie Barnes, and it feels like last year was a year where people became firmly more divided on him than they were. But I love Scottie Barnes. I don't really know what his ceiling is. Like, it's hard for me to map out. But how do you feel, like, as a fan? Like, where are you coming down on Scottie Barnes?
I love Scottie Barnes because I think he knows that he is not a takeover offense number one guy. I think he's comfortable knowing that. He knows that there's got to be some different talents on his team to really excel, and he is so open to passing it to all of them and making it happen. And that's why his mind is there. The mind is perfect, I think. But at times he's definitely growing at this point of his career, where there are some times where he's like kind of gets a little fussy and walks off the court and when he shouldn't be walking off the court, or takes too many shots when he shouldn't be. But as a player, he's a different kind of player than Anthony Edwards, obviously. Like, he can't be that 1 and 1A whenever you need him to be. But I think he kind of knows that, and I think he is willing to make some sacrifices for himself. Like, that's why I think Anthony Edwards, I said he's created some high expectations for Timberwolves fans this coming season, because he's basically said, conference finals, cool, but we want to win the title. And that's okay, because he's willing to work at it. He's willing to be this guy who used to be, as you said, Trey, shooting bank shots whenever he wanted. But then it comes playoff time, Mike Conley can shoot, and he can pass it to him. He trusts Nickeil Alexander-Walker. He trusts all these guys. Scottie Barnes definitely has that trust within him. That being said, he needs somebody like Emmanuel Quickley.
Yeah, he needs a guy.
Emmanuel Quickley is a very good scorer, so I have high expectations. There's very low expectations in Toronto. There's literally expectations of them making the play-in tournament, and then that would exceed everything. Just making the play-in tournament. When they just
making the play-in.
Yeah, just making the play-in. They gave Scottie Barnes a maximum contract, which is obviously happening in the NBA a lot these days. But to give a guy a maximum contract and just hope for a play-in tournament, that ain't much. But Emmanuel Quickley and RJ Barrett. I start with Quickley because I think he's got a lot of talent, and he came in midseason and it all didn't work out. But they gave Quickley a lot of money. And so it kind of has to happen at the same time for Barnes and Quickley for them to really excel. But he's a great guy to start an offense, but not finish an offense at times for Scottie Barnes. He can be a number two at times. So I love the dude because I think he knows that, again, he's not going to score 35 in this game.
The Raptors, I have a fun little Raptor story, which is that last year. So now that the Timberwolves had the season they had, now it's like Snoop Dogg's front row and all this. But for going into last season, and I'm not saying this to toot my own horn, this is actually not a good thing. I would say that the two most notable visible Timberwolves fans were like me and Craig Kilborn, and you don't want that. There's no world where like a writer guy should be one of your most notable fans. But I went to the opening game last year. I go to multiple Timberwolves games a year, and they opened in Toronto last year. So that's not far from Columbus. I went to the game. They lost, and they played horribly. I mean, the Timberwolves just like looked atrocious, and they lost to a Raptors team that, they should have maybe won. And as I was walking out of the stadium, a cluster of Raptors fans recognized me and started heckling me, like individually. They're like, "Oh, it's So it was like, oh man, this is I've made it. Perhaps I'm so
yeah.
I'm so recognizable that I can get heckled at Timberwolves games. Thankfully things worked out better. But after that Toronto loss, I was like, oh no, it's gonna be another bad season.
Yeah, that's a great story because I don't think Raptors fans really get the chance to heckle a lot.
No, they were feeling great. They were
players.
feeling, yeah, they were like, man, this is our year. They still had Siakam at the time. I thought Oh boy. But the Raptors, I know both of you are fans of teams in the Eastern Conference. I think the East is so subpar at the moment, very top heavy. That like
sure.
literally, like anything can happen.
Yeah.
Literally anything can happen. Like the Bulls could win like 35 games and make the play-in. Doesn't.
I mean, that does happen
possible.
almost every year. The Bulls win 35 and make the play-in. Like, that'd be a great season this year. I'm jealous of you guys. Hanif's talking about Anthony Edwards, one of the biggest stars in the league. You've at least got a Rookie of the Year recently and Scottie Barnes. I'm getting hyped about Matas Buzelis, the 14th pick, and what people have said is the worst draft in 20 years. And I can't wait to see this guy on the court.
Oh,
Different expectations this year.
You got Kobe White. I love Kobe White.
That's right. He had a great year last year.
yeah, right.
Should have won Most Improved.
I love this optimism about the Eastern Conference because it is totally true. There are those mid-range teams. We live in Atlanta. They are one of those teams where the expectations are not high at all. They are expected to be a mediocre team. But, Hanif, you're totally right. There's going to be one of those teams in the Eastern Conference that excels this season, that does something that you don't expect.
I think it'll be Orlando. I mean, I know Orlando had a good season. I think Orlando's going to be like a top 4 team this year. And I think they're going to be, because I know I'm in Ohio, so I feel like I should whisper this, but I just don't believe in the Cavs anymore. I just don't understand the math. The Garland-Mitchell thing just doesn't work, and they keep kind of saying, well, it's going to work this time. Yeah. And it just doesn't work, and I'm starting to believe less in Evan Mobley, like really starting to believe less in Evan Mobley, just like day by day.
This is the year. This is the year, man. I do think that it's totally true when you look at it. They've got 2 point guards in Mitchell and Garland and essentially 2 centers in Allen and Mobley. So it is a little bit convoluted. But Kenny Atkinson, their new head coach, is talking up Evan Mobley big time. And I feel like, there was that vision last year in the playoffs where you saw him operate in a different way without Jared Allen. Mm-hmm. And they may have to make changes, but Kenny Atkinson is just saying we are going through Evan Mobley, and so I think we're going to see a different team. I think we'll be interviewing you perhaps in a year talking about Evan Mobley being good.
Talking about Evan Mobley finally becoming Chris Bosh.
That's the hopes.
Look, the Cavs and the Timberwolves are at least in the top part of each of their respective conferences. It's unlikely they both make it to the NBA Finals, but if they did, who are you pulling for, Hanif?
Oh, the Timberwolves, without question.
Yeah?
Easily the Timberwolves. Yeah, I mean, I don't think every year I say the Timberwolves are going to go 82-0, and it never happens, surprisingly. But I do think that I think the Cavs will certainly not make the finals, because I just think the Celtics are going to be too hard to get through. And if the Celtics don't get you, the Sixers will. But I think there's a path for the Timberwolves to make the finals. The Thunder are going to be so hard to beat. But I think that's a two-person. I think the Nuggets are the Nuggets still, but it does really feel to me like that's a 3-team race to the finals in the West. It's Nuggets, Timberwolves, Thunder, all in the same division too. And I don't really know what the playoffs look like and how that shakes out, because it all depends on health. If Jamal Murray is not 100%, then the Nuggets season can go a little south. Mm-hmm. And I guess we don't know how well the new additions to the Thunder will fit, but it just seems like they're perfect fits. Like Isaiah Harden seems like a perfect fit for that team.
Yeah.
And they're going to get 1 million rebounds. But I do think that the Timberwolves have a path to the finals. I'm not excluding the Mavericks intentionally, but I do think I don't know. I don't believe, even though the Mavericks obviously swept a very exhausted Timberwolves team,
right?
In the finals, West Conference Finals last year. I don't know if they got that in them again. Then again, I also am someone who notoriously looks at the Mavericks year after year and says, "Man, I just don't know if I believe in these guys." And then they have an incredible, and then they have an incredible season. So
they changed up that team, getting Klay Thompson most likely as their starting small forward. So it is a different team defensively, that's for sure. I just want to go back to Trey mentioned Matas Buzelis, who played for the G League Ignite.
Let's go.
And we saw him down playing the College Park Skyhawks. We watched the live game, and we actually ran into you at that arena when Scoot Henderson was here, and you wrote about him, and I went back and read it because I've sort of gone both ways with him because he looked incredible when we were watching it. He rattled that rim so hard. It was shaking the entire arena, it felt like. And then he goes to Portland, and it obviously did not go well. But after reading your piece again, I thought, all right, Scoot's back. Like, what happened in that first year for you, Hanif? Was it just that moving into the NBA, that type of thing, and going into the starting role? It seemed like an odd situation there.
Yeah, writing that piece, I wrote, for those who are tuning, I wrote a pretty extensive profile on Scoot Henderson leading up to the draft, and I spent a lot of time with him, and I watched his workouts, and I watched him play multiple games, and I interviewed him multiple times, and it was so easy to believe in him because of his depth of belief in himself. And I was watching these workouts, and he works so hard. I mean, he really does work really hard. And so much of the talk was the shot. If the shot comes around, he'll be really dangerous. And he doesn't maybe need the shot to come around right away. But I do think maybe as a rookie guard, in his framework of play, where it's heavy attacking the rim, not like very quick, but not always decisive with the ball, a shot would be helpful. And I think not even having kind of a consistent mid-range shot really impacted him. It impacted the way he was defended. It impacted and also a lot of his indecisiveness as a passer kind of showed up in rim attacks, where he would kind of get to the rim at points and then not seem to know what to do upon his arrival. And he did have some injury stuff too, to be clear. I also am not sure if Portland is the most conducive place to his development as an NBA point guard. And some of that is because there aren't enough shooters there. Ayton can kind of clog up the lane a little bit, to clog up some driving lanes a little bit. And this isn't to say that he needs to go somewhere else. I think that Portland just maybe has to learn to cater to what he does. And I think it's going to be a slow process. I thought that he would be more equipped than he looked, but I also am very aware that it's hard for guards. It's hard for guards to come into the NBA and be impactful. And I don't know what it's going to take for him, but I think Portland is. I was surprised with the draft. Maybe I think I maybe would not have gone in that direction if I were Portland, but I like the idea of maybe getting him some lob threats, getting him some more size. But I do worry about the clogging of the lane, because his most direct comparison is Westbrook. People are kind of like, he's kind of like Westbrook, but if you remember those early OKC Thunder teams with Westbrook, Durant, Ibaka, Harden, Westbrook had a lot of room to operate, a lot of space to operate in the lane and then paint. And Scoot just doesn't have that right now in Portland. And so I worry about his development. He just works so hard at it though. Like I think he's going to be a different player in year 2.
Yeah, and Portland changed it up with the roster this coming season by trading Malcolm Brogdon. So he's going to be the starting point guard alongside Anthony Simons, who can score, Jeremy Grant, who can be there. Denny Avdia is big now with Portland, so it's going to be a different team playing for a guy in Chauncey Billups who took a long time to get good as a point guard.
Very true.
So hopefully that happens for Scoot here in year 2.
It's a hard position. It's a massively hard position. We know all the positions are hard, but I'm saying when you're a young point guard, it's going to take a minute, and even if you think you've gotten to a place, not everyone's going to be Tyrese Halliburton. You know what I mean? Like not everyone, and Tyrese Halliburton, it has to be said, was so league ready when he came into the league because of how much he played in college and his size and his passing ability. But most point guards who come into the league have a real hard growing curve. And it's a tough position. And I really think once Scoot develops just consistent, I don't even think it needs to be a consistent 3-point shot. A consistent mid-range shot would really open up a lot for him.
Like Westbrook did.
Yeah, that's true.
Like Westbrook did.
Yeah, I appreciate the optimism around Scoot. I feel like I can walk away from this interview with some sincere optimism for Scoot, for the Eastern Conference MORs, middle of the road teams as well. I think there'll be some good stuff there this year. I believe. I wanted to thank you, Hanif, for coming on. Really, 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 really appreciate it for taking the time out, because I know there's always, this year has been very, very busy for you, and we appreciate you coming on.
Man, this is a real joy. I'm such a fan of the show, have been for so long, have been since the starters day. So this means a lot. I really appreciate y'all.
Oh, thank you, Hanif. We appreciate it.
Yeah, big time. But I did see there's no Atlanta stop on the tour yet.
Not yet. I'm going to do something in Atlanta in the spring. That I'm going to try to align with a Hawks game. It's one of those things where I enjoy watching the Hawks. I really do. I don't know. I know that the optimism, I have friends who are Hawks fans, and I know the optimism is pretty low in Atlanta right now. And I actually am surprised that Trae Young survived the offseason in Atlanta. But man, I love watching the Hawks. They're just kind of like, they're one of those teams where it's like you got one great guy who's fun to watch. The rest of the team's kind of like some guys, and they just roll the ball out and let them play. And I love that. So I'm going to come to Atlanta in spring. Yeah, that's my favorite kind of team construction is a guy and then some guys. I think that's I love that team. That's my favorite type of NBA team. Probably not to root for individually, but to watch. Gosh, I love the Spurs are kind of that last year, a guy and some guys. Yeah. Love that.
Iverson 2001, Derrick Rose, when he won his MVP, literally just get one awesome guy on offense. Everybody else will play defense as hard as they can, and we can see what you're going to do. Makes for good highlight packages and competitive games because they might not always be blowouts.
For sure.
Well, we appreciate your time, Hanif. There's always this year an incredible read. So thank you so much. It's going into year 2, I guess, of a book tour. You're saying spring next year.
Let's go.
You're a busy man. Busy man.
Yeah, I'm never going to stop touring. I'll be like the Grateful Dead or whatever.
Well, Trey will come see you.
I'll be there.
Because he loves the Grateful Dead. No, can't wait. Atlanta. Got to make it happen.
That's right. See you down at the Highlight Factory.
Yeah, we'll be there. All right, thank you, Hanif. And
thanks, y'all. Appreciate y'all.
Fitting that we ended talking about Russell Westbrook a little bit there, because on Thursday's show, our next show, I'm going to have a what if this happened in Russell Westbrook's career, to sort of go through his career, because that career is not talked about enough, so I want to get into it. What if this happened with Russell Westbrook multiple times? Thanks a lot to Hanif Abdurraqib for coming on. He was awesome. But for now...
You heard it here first. Have a great time. Turn up. Love you guys. Awesome.
Thanks for joining us. And remember, this book is in stores. Go buy it.